horse is kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving some with burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're Burnin Daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burnin Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy.
Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Happy Labor Day, I guess. Early Monday morning, I'm recording this. Been meaning to record something about this for a while, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. We're in the midst of the weirdest presidential race, one of the weirdest times in history, at least for United States. And I've just come to the conclusion that I'll put the banner up here. Everything is fake and gay. Like, I don't know what's real anymore. I don't believe the news. I still read the news and try to glean what information I can from your traditional outlets like the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all your traditional newspapers that you might think of. When it comes to the normal media landscape, I guess you'd say, cable news is hot garbage, has been for quite some time. So I don't really watch it, and I get my news from podcasts, independent media outlets, and a combination of whatever government propaganda that we're fed through mainstream media, which is essentially state media, government media. And I don't care, particularly cable news. I don't care what channel you look at, whether it's Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, any of it. Look at how many former government employees are now contributors, Fox News contributors, CNN contributors. Just take a look at how many staffers or former cabinet members, former CIA directors, FBI directors, generals, former, spokesman for the Secretary of State or State Department or Department of Defense. Doesn't matter. Just next time you're watching that garbage, if you do, just pay attention to how many former government employees are working for that. So excuse me just 1 second. So anyway, we've had this roller coaster of a journey essentially since 2015, when Donald Trump announced he was running. He had a brief period during the Republican primary where the media actually and the Democrats kind of wanted Trump to win, and they played nice with him. And then once he got the nomination, all that went out the window. And it's just been a series of shenanigans that I don't really quite know how to explain, I guess. me see. There, I'm gonna go with that. How's that look for you guys? Maybe not. I don't know if I like it. Go with that. And so back in 2016, I was still living in Kansas. I moved to Nevada right after Trump took office, and I didn't vote for him. I voted third party. I wasn't voting for Hillary. I lived in Kansas, so it was a good place to make a protest vote, where Kansas was going to go red pretty much no matter what. So it was safe to just throw a third party in there, and I think I voted like the Constitution Party or something. It was a write-in candidate. I voted for Trump in 2020, despite him being just hamstrung by whether it be his own administration or the Democrats. There was just this kind of violent counter reaction to Donald Trump. And while I didn't like the guy, didn't vote for him, I never really saw him as like an existential threat. I thought he was a wild card, and I didn't necessarily trust what he was doing. I thought he had some instincts that I didn't care for. But looking at his record, he made the economy hum along pretty decent. I mean, it was kind of I can't say he truly did a good job, but he was fine. I had extra money laying around when he was president. I don't really anymore. It's I don't know if you guys have noticed, but shit's gotten little expensive. And then since 2020, we had the whole COVID crisis, and I don't know. I can't give Trump too high of a grade on all that, and might be unpopular opinion for some of you guys, but Trump wasn't great on COVID. I think he failed pretty miserably, honestly. But then again, so did everyone else. And while the Democrats were undoubtedly worse, like far worse than Trump was on COVID, he also was responsible for laying the groundwork for all these Democrat governors to kind of just go crazy. And so I can't help but kind of just put a lot of that blame back on old Trumpy Bear. It's he was in charge at the time. Did he mean to cause all this? Probably not, but it all kind of happened under his watch, on his watch. So I kind of just I find myself with no other real choice but to place the blame at his at least partially at his feet, and so therefore I was a little, how would you call it? I was a little hesitant to vote for Donald Trump again, and I really didn't want to, but much like the first time around, the reaction to Donald J. Trump has been so crazy that I find myself, I guess, kind of defending Trump on a lot of stuff, just because the reporting and all that on him is so wildly inaccurate. And then you watch the series of events that has happened since 2020 that the Democrats, in particular, the uniparty, if you will, the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats, pretty much all Democrats. There's a handful of honest people that, while they don't like Trump, they have a tendency of treating him fairly, and it's been a wild scene to watch unfold. We've currently got a major candidate for president who has been found guilty on, how was it, 34 different counts of what they call felony. But if you look into the actual case of things, it's all a bunch of nonsense. And while I don't particularly like Donald Trump, I'm not sold at all that he's what's right for the country. The people that are against him are so much worse than what they're doing that I feel just compelled that I have to throw my vote behind Donald Trump, because these clowns that are in power do not deserve it. I'm not saying that Trump deserves it, but I'll roll my dice with Donald Trump. I'll take my chances, and I can tell by all the actions that have been taken, none of these people that are fighting against Donald Trump deserve a shot at power. They have proven pretty overwhelmingly that they don't deserve it, and that's kind of where I'm at, and it's not a real great place to be. I've got a horribly stuffy nose, so please hold on once again. All right. Hopefully that lasts a little bit longer this time. So let's start with the conviction of Donald Trump. First things first, we've never seen anything like this before. As a country, the United States of America doesn't prosecute its former presidents, particularly. The closest we had was Richard Nixon back during the Watergate scandal, in which he still got reelected pretty overwhelmingly, and then was forced to step down. If you could look into all that, and I have some. I'm not an expert on the Watergate scandal by any means, but I've read enough that while Nixon probably wasn't the best guy on earth, I'm kind of under the impression that he was set up by, by the Uniparty. The Democrats played a big hand in it, and Republicans such as George H.W. Bush factored in pretty heavily. And I won't go into it too much, but because it's been a while since I looked into it. And but after all the research that I've done, I'm still fairly convinced that was kind of an inside job. They wanted Nixon out of the way, and they got him out of the way. Donald Trump, kind of the same way, except way more to the extreme on how they chose to get him out of the way. Haven't got it done yet. They, I say they, but somebody shot Donald Trump, tried to almost killed him. You know, they missed just by fractions of an inch, turned his head. Otherwise, his head would have exploded on live TV, and we would have had that. I mean, you would have had Trump's head exploding in a pink mist. Had things gone just slightly different, and that's been a little over a month now that's happened. And the crazy thing is, we don't know much about it. People have almost forgotten that Yeah, it's the first major assassination attempt that we've had since Ronald Reagan in 82 or something like that. And there was a very brief moment where the Democrats said, "Whoa, we gotta reel this back in. We gotta keep everything on the up and up, and this is not okay. We can't be out trying to assassinate our political opponents. We got to tone down the rhetoric. We can't keep calling him, the next incarnation of Hitler, and expect people, I guess, not to take a shot at him." So while they had good instincts, didn't last very long. Couple of days, maybe if we're lucky, it lasted a couple of days. We're like, all right, we're gonna come together and we're gonna do this election thing, but we're gonna do it for real now. We don't want to win like that, blah blah blah. And little pause in all the heated rhetoric, and then right back at it. Donald Trump, to his credit, has seems to maybe have toned things back a little bit. But even so, even Trump can't, you can't keep that guy down. He's gonna take some shots. The guy that was running against him, Joe Biden, I guess he's still alive. They trot him out every now and then to do an interview. And it's not much different than his entire presidency, but the guy could barely talk now. And that was... So Joe Biden is a great example of why I've got some libertarian tendencies, and my worldview doesn't exactly line up with your traditional Republican. It's more in line with the traditional Republicans for sure, but it's still, I still have a lot of policy disagreements with your typical standard Republican. But then on the other hand, you have the Democrats and Joe Biden, who I said in 2020 was too old to be president. I was on record. I could see this guy had clearly was not with it back in 2020, and they rolled the dice with him anyways, and he got much, much, much worse. It's almost like you took a guy that was pushing 80 years old and gave him arguably the hardest, most stressful job in the world, which is, president of the United States. And well, he did about as good as I thought he was going to do. They tried to cover it up. The media talking points for a long time was that this is the best Joe Biden we've ever seen. I mean, he is so with it, fully with it, able to do the job. And that was a talking point. If you were talking about Joe Biden's age, you were ageist, and you're a conspiracy theorist that Joe Biden was not well. Like that's just crazy talk. You're a conspiracy theorist. And then like that, after he has the debate with Donald Trump, famously all but shits his pants. And nobody has ever confirmed that he didn't shit his pants during that debate, but he was out of it. He couldn't finish a sentence. And then he got to what they call his stutter, which I lived through the 8 years where Joe Biden was vice president, and there was never a mention about his stutter. I didn't know that he ever had a stutter until he ran in 2020, and then they started bringing up this stutter thing. Turns out he was just old and senile, probably had dementia or Parkinson's. There was, if you remember, there was about a week or two when they were actively trying to push Joe Biden out, and there was all these stories leaked about Parkinson's doctors showing up at the White House, and of course that was a conspiracy theory to even speculate whether Joe Biden had dementia. That was grand old conspiracy. Like you just and you know, you listen to these people, and it was disgusting to even bring up. He is so with it. Those Parkinson's doctors, that could be anybody. It could be anybody in the White House that they're visiting. Oh, never mind the fact that it's on record that they met with Joe Biden, but I'm sure it had nothing to do with his mental capacity at all. You know, it was a coincidence. Well, then the drum beats turn against him. They're like, oh shit, we can't win with this guy. And pretty sure we're not going to be able to win with Kamala. And so all the knives come out. We got to get rid of Joe. For the good of the party, he has got to step down. And that just like overnight, the narrative shift. He is with it. He is sharp. Best version of Joe Biden we've seen so far. To, oh my God, that guy can't win. We got to get him out. And lo and behold, they did. And he drops out with a screenshot of a typed letter that was supposedly signed by Joe Biden. I didn't look too hard into it, but from people that I listen to and I trust, you know, that the signature didn't really line up with signatures that we've seen of Joe Biden over the years. And because of that, we got the announcement that the president of the United States was not going to be running for re-election. And remember, this was a couple days after the Republican convention. So Donald Trump gets shot, almost gets killed on live TV, and he keeps going, you know, and has one of the more iconic pictures taken of him as, you know, he gets shot in the ear, ducks down, gets covered up by Secret Service, and as they're trying to take him off the stage, he stands up, pumps his fist in the air, and yells, "Fight, fight, fight." And there was something very, very powerful about that. And as much as I don't particularly care for Donald Trump, I got to say that's the guy ain't no bitch. He didn't cower, he didn't run, and only briefly did he try to hide. But it looked like it was full steam ahead Donald Trump at that point. And then comes Joe Biden's little dropout note. And so I wasn't alive when Nixon stepped down, but it was a pretty big deal. And there was months of hearings about the Watergate stuff. And as evidence started to mount, so did the pressure from his own party to step down. And he did a whole televised deal, which I guess to his credit, Joe Biden did too. 4 days after he tweeted that he was stepping down. And that was the craziest part is, you know, if you watch politics, there's all this rigmarole about how you do things. And you know, and it's a very, I mean, narcissism's kind of in the job description for president of the United States. So you have to think that you alone are qualified to run a country of 330 million, which is, it's a pretty tall task. And None of that happened with Joe Biden. Which I find it hard to believe that he's actually running his Twitter account. Donald Trump, I believe, was. I don't think there's a whole lot of question behind that. Donald Trump it's what he's known for, is having a bomb ass Twitter account. But Joe Biden's not. He's not known as a social media guy. He's fucking ancient. And then he just tweets out a picture of this resignation letter. According to people that I've listened to, like I said, I don't know. I haven't researched it too much. Probably should, but according to them, the signature doesn't really match up. And then radio silence for 4 days. And then I guess right after that, he tweets out his complete endorsement of Kamala Harris, who was also trying to be thrown, or they were trying to throw under the bus because, well, let's face it, she's awful, terrible. The one person on earth maybe that is more unlikable than Hillary Clinton is kind of who they're left with to run for president. And that's there was some there was some brief discussion about possibly having like an open primary. And this part's pretty important, mind you. They were gonna open up the process and let the party of democracy, that's trying to save democracy, instead of letting the democratic process play out and seeing who people kind of want. And not that it would have been very democratic in the first place, because you'd have been picking between pre-screened kind of canned candidates. So there was talk about Gavin Newsom, there's talk about Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, Roy Cooper, who were all Democratic governors. And I'm not a fan of any of them. I think maybe the Beshear guy's somewhat normal. He's a Democratic governor of Kentucky. But none of that happened. It was because of Joe apparently throwing his weight behind Kamala, which I still think is Donald Trump's best nickname for her is Kamala. He just spells it wrong. And I don't know. I kind of like that one. So Joe throws his weight behind Kamala. Then this article comes out from Seymour Hersh, who's I would say well respected. He gets a lot of shit, mostly because he says a lot of stuff that people in power don't want you to know, which makes me a fan. And his reporting was that they tried like hell to play nice with Joe and said, you got to step down. There's, like, reports were saying like a near zero chance that he could win the election, which I think is probably pretty accurate. It had become painfully obvious that Joe Biden was not with it, could not handle the job. Joe Biden didn't want to step down. And apparently worse came to worse, and they threatened to invoke the 25th Amendment, which is, if I remember right, it's either the last or second to last constitutional amendment that was ever passed. And it came on the heels of FDR, who was elected 4 times to president. Never before had anyone, I don't know if anyone had even ever ran for a third term before that, let alone win. But not only did FDR run and win a third term, he ran and won a 4th term. Died in office. But after that, everybody thought, well, we can't have that anymore. We got to go back to the George Washington model, which is 2 terms and then you go home. And they codified it into law, changed the Constitution. And they set up this process where if the vice president and the majority of the cabinet get together and agree that the president can't continue to serve, they can invoke this 25th Amendment and remove him from office, and then the vice president takes over. And so that was threatened. And of course, that would have been a huge stain on Joe Biden's legacy. The fact that he was in office with a clear case of dementia or some sort of mental deficiency, that's irrelevant until it wasn't. But now everything's on the table. And Joe Biden, being the good soldier that he is, he said, okay, I give. I'm going to step aside, and but I'm putting all my weight behind Kamala. Now, there was an issue with the campaign funding. He had something like $100 million in his war chest. It was going to have to be refunded if they opened up to like a mini primary and an open convention. Legally, they would not have been able to just transfer that money to the new candidate. They had to give it to somebody who was on the ticket already, which left Kamala Harris. At the time, was the most unpopular vice president in recorded American history. Like, ever since they started doing approval polling for the VP, every single one of the vice presidents had been more popular than Kamala Harris. She was sitting at something like 28 or 32, somewhere in that range. I don't know the exact number, but very, very low, historically low approval ratings. And then once again, the narrative shifts overnight. Boom. It becomes clear that Kamala Harris is the go-to, and that's the play they're going to make. And now they're the party of joy. And I watched a few of the speeches at the DNC, and I will say they were having themselves a good time. It was quite the party over at the DNC. They were just raging it up and convincing themselves that Kamala Harris was the best candidate that we've ever seen, and all full steam ahead. We're going to have the first woman president. To be fair, there was a lot to be excited about when you compare her to Joe Biden. Number one being that she's not senile. That was, I guess that's really the only plus that they really have in reality for Kamala Harris. So they roll her out, but they don't let her speak. Well, at least not in an uncontrolled environment. So she gave her rallies where she can read off a teleprompter, and they like one of the content, or one of the rallies was with Megan the Stallion, which it seems like a lot of people came out to see Megan the Stallion in concert, and then a good chunk of the crowd left when Kamala got up to speak. But there were still a lot of people there, so they could say huge crowds. Just like, I mean, you think Donald Trump had big crowds. Whew. So then there becomes that whole talking point where Donald Trump couldn't even pull this number of people. And to his credit, Donald Trump fell for it, and we had another discussion about who had the bigger crowd size, because that's what we've devolved into. And so if you ask what the Democrats are running on, you'd be hard pressed to get a real clear answer, but they will tell you they're running against Donald Trump for sure. That's about the only. And if that's a policy, I mean, I guess maybe it's a policy. It seems to be their only real one. They'll throw out some token platitudes for the left wingers. You know, that she proposed what they call anti-price gouging laws, which it's a nicer way to say price controls, which typically don't work, but it's a left winger, so it's kind of one of their standard go-tos. But she went, I think, almost 40 days without sitting for an interview with she sat with Dana Bash from CNN. CNN, not really known to be a real straight shooter when it comes to media. They're, you could say, solidly anti-Trump over at CNN. But she sits down with Dana Bash and gives a pretty much nothing of an interview. There was some somewhat tough questions that didn't get answered. She came out in 2020, mind you, when she actually ran for president. Didn't last long. Actually dropped out before anybody could vote for her. Then she gets selected as vice president because she's a woman of color. And that's specifically who Joe Biden said he was going to pick for his vice president was a woman first. And then it was a woman of color because, you know, it's the left-wing party of, you know, identity politics. So you gotta check the box of all the diversity that you can. And a woman of color is high up on that list. So she gets shuffled in as vice president, gets put in charge of the border, which is one of the main talking points that got Donald Trump elected in 2016 was the border issue, which seemed to somewhat be resolved when Trump was in office. And then on day one, Joe Biden issues like 90 something executive orders, which repealed all of Trump's border stuff, caused this essentially not to have a southern border. I guess the Canadians don't really want to come over that bad because it doesn't seem to be an issue on the northern border as much. And I'm thinking that's more just due to weather. And, well, there's also not many Latinos in Canada, so it makes sense that they're coming from the southern border. But we're not just getting Latinos, we're getting Chinese, we're getting Africans, we're getting Middle Easterners, all flooding across the southern border. Depends on who you talk to. It's anywhere from like 5 to 20 million people that came across just while since Joe Biden has been president. And Kamala Harris was tasked to take care of that situation. Border czar is what she was called until she wasn't. And then they said, oh, she was never the border czar, even though there was these same news outlets that are saying that, oh, that's just fake news. You know, she was never the border czar. They themselves had reported with those exact words, Kamala Harris and border czar. But now you got to forget all that. That didn't actually happen. So when the primary season started, RFK Jr. threw his hat in the ring. He was going to run for Democratic president. I'd listened to Bobby Kennedy quite a bit, and while the voice is pretty rough to get through, he does not have a great speaking voice. We can say that. I don't feel like I'm being too awful mean by saying that, but it's true. It's got a weird voice. It's kind of tough to understand sometimes. But I didn't hate what he had to say, and I thought, well, if Donald Trump's going to be the Republican candidate, That's pretty set in stone. There was no real competitor on the Republican side. And then, so I thought, well, if Donald Trump is pretty much set in stone, they're going to be the Republican nominee. Let's see what the options are running against him. And I thought, if it comes down to Donald Trump versus Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I'm kind of okay with either one that wins there. And I'm still more in the Trump camp, but I kind of like RFK. I think he's a little kooky. He's got some incredibly liberal positions, but he said some really good things about some of the most important issues that I consider anyway. So like government overreach, government spending, foreign wars. He was pretty good on most of those. And I thought, all right, I'm gonna register Democrat. I'm gonna throw my vote behind Bobby Kennedy, at least in the primary. Hedge my bets, and you're like, hey, if RFK's on the Democratic ticket, probably still gonna vote for Trump, but I could see Trump losing to RFK. And frankly, I thought I would be okay with that. Didn't get to make that vote. They try to shut down, the Democrats try to shut down pretty much all opposition to Joe Biden, who, reminder, was a feeble old man that his brain doesn't work correctly. And it was painfully obvious at the time, but they ran him anyways. He did face a couple of competitors. Some of you might not have known that, but Marianne Williamson and I forget the dude from Minnesota, Dean Phillips. Dean Phillips was his name. They decided, all right, we're gonna run for president against Joe Biden. Well, there was state after state after state where they, like some places, they just didn't even hold a primary. They're just like, no, this is our guy. Take him or leave him. He's not stepping down. He's the incumbent president. So we're just not even going to hold a primary, which I guess, to be fair, is not all that unusual. Once the party has their guy in office, and I say guy because up until always, it's been a guy. It might be different this year. We'll see. And I say we'll see because while I think Kamala is terrible choice. She 100% could win this thing. But the point I was getting to, they shut down primaries. They pushed RFK out of the party because they used any number of just shisty maneuvers to get him out. And eventually he said, well, I guess they don't want me here anymore. So he goes independent. That ruins my my little plan of hedging my bets for the election. And now you have Kamala Harris, who, granted, she was the VP on the 2020 ticket. She's VP during this campaign, but nobody has ever voted for her for president in a primary, in a general, otherwise. She got wrecked in the Democratic debates back in 2020. If you remember right, she called Joe Biden a racist, essentially, during one of the debates. And then at the next debate, Tulsi Gabbard pretty much just reached in her heart or in her chest and pulled her heart out while it was still beating. And then kind of ate it in front of her. Like, I mean, just really, really did a number on her. But now it's just like lockstep support behind her. And the party that, if you listen to a lot of their talking points against Donald Trump, they'll talk about what a threat to democracy is. Threat to democracy. But there was no process by which the people chose Kamala Harris to be their candidate. Like I said, historically unpopular until she wasn't, and it begs the question: is like, is all this support actually real? Are people just that excited that they don't have to try to defend a feeble old man anymore, or is it all just smoke and mirrors, or is it a little bit of both? I'm leaning towards it's mostly smoke and mirrors, but also I think there is some sort of legitimate excitement, if you call it that, to support Kamala Harris, mostly because Trump broke a lot of people. Between Trump and the COVID lockdowns, like, some people are just gone. They ain't coming back, I don't think. My buddy Rob's one of those, good friend of mine. Does a show with me every week, every other week, something like that. Talk to him in a group chat pretty much every day. Good dude. I like him. Crazy liberal, but he's one of those people that just like, I ain't the same guy that I used to know. And he is so violently anti-Trump that I don't know if there is an argument you can make to him that he's going to believe. And guys like him are just, they will rationalize all these shady maneuvers, like prosecuting Trump, all in favor of it. The guy's a criminal, got to go to jail, regardless of the fact that they changed the law in New York just to get him. Got to get Donald Trump. Got to get him. They changed the law just for him. They got him. They managed to get him convicted on some bullshit. So it was falsifying business records, which is not a felony, by the way. Falsifying business records is a misdemeanor. What made it a felony is they said it was covering up a crime. They falsified business records to cover up a crime. What crime was he covering up? Well, we don't know. The judge gave the jurors 3 options of what potential crimes could have been committed. And we say potential crimes because the crimes that they're listing are federal election crimes, which the state of New York does not have jurisdiction over. And Donald Trump wasn't charged with any federal election crimes, let alone convicted of it. So in order for this felony count to go for it, he had to have previously been convicted of a crime that was not in the jurisdiction of where he's being charged for this felony. So they had to manufacture a crime in order to convict him of this felony, which they did. I don't see how it would ever hold up to any real legal scrutiny. There's still he's actually got a sentencing date for that about a week after the first debate, which is coming up here. So today's the 2nd, so I guess it'd be next Tuesday, maybe. I think it's September 10th is when the first debate is, which could be good. We'll see if Trump can control himself like he did with the last Biden debate. And if he just lets her talk, I think she's not going to be good. But Donald Trump's one to pick a fight, and he could come off looking like a complete asshole, which is not out of the question with Donald Trump. He's done that many a time. But let's say he does well. He doesn't interrupt. They keep the muted mics, and he has a good performance like he did against Joe Biden. and the poll numbers start leaning his way. Well, a week later, he's got to go before a judge, and they have this sentencing hearing. So are they going to try to throw him in jail before the election? Don't put it past him. They've already filed charges against him many, many times, convicted him on some bullshit, 34 charges of bullshit. And then he was nearly assassinated. Whether or not the administration was involved in that, I couldn't tell you, but I've got questions. It was what seems to be just a criminal case of negligence and incompetence trying to protect this guy. It seemed like there was plenty of people that had seen this assassination or attempt pretty much unfold for as long as an hour beforehand. They had the dude on camera with a rangefinder scoping out the joint. There was people yelling at the local police, and I don't know if they notified Secret Service specifically, but there was people there in charge of the security, whether they were an employee of the Secret Service or not. Secret Service has full command of that security detail, and it was made known to the security detail that there was a dude on the roof with a gun, and they never pulled Trump off the stage, and as a result, got him shot, damn near killed. So I don't think there's really anything that's off the table for these people. Like they're out to get him by any means possible. And well, I'm not convinced that Donald Trump is going to go down in history as a good president. It's possible. The fact that they're trying so many shady, underhanded, and just crazy things to take him out. It kind of makes me think, well, what's the why is this guy such a big threat to you? Person that I really can't stand. I don't like their politics. I don't like what they stand for, but yet they're coming after Trump with everything they got. And while I might not like him, he sure pisses off the right people. And I've kind of just, it's not the best way to vote, I don't think, but given the choices, there's only two real choices. We got Kamala Harris and whoever's pulling the strings behind that campaign, and then there's Donald Trump. And for all of his faults, I don't think there's anybody pulling strings behind Donald Trump. I don't get that impression at all. And maybe that's me being naive. He did have some very questionable cabinet picks that would lead somebody to believe that he's not his own man. And I guess when it comes to American politics, are you ever really an independent guy? Or if you are, like somebody like Thomas Massey, who is there just to support it, or to represent his constituents, that guy doesn't have any real power. So is Donald Trump a puppet of the deep state? I think to a certain extent, yes. Not necessarily willingly. However, he has consistently pushed back against those types of people as well. So I'm gonna roll my dice with him. I think. I'm pretty sure. I don't see any other real clear option. And now Donald Trump has gained endorsements from people like RFK Jr., who is somewhat dropping out of the race, which, by the way, even after he went independent, he was sued multiple times in multiple states by the Democrats to keep him off the ballot. Spent a ton of money and time gathering signatures and even getting on the ballot, which is, I guess he says he's on all 50 ballots, which I didn't think was going to happen. Because the system really is rigged against a third party or an independent candidate. And it seems that he actually is on all 50 state ballots. And after some wheeling and dealing and some big talks with Donald Trump, he decided, all right, I'm out. And he steps out, and he said he's pulling his name off the ballot in all the competitive states, so all the swing states. He said there's about 10 states where he was wanting to pull his name, and then he was going to stay on the ballot in all the deep red states and all the deep blue states, where him being on the ballot's not going to affect the outcome as much or at all. Then the Democrats, on a dime, flip again once he's decided he's thrown his weight behind Donald Trump. They sue to keep him on the ballot because, according to RFK, him being on the ballot hurts Donald Trump's chances. And so they fight to keep him off the Democratic primary, so much so that he says, screw it, I'm out of this party, I'm doing my own thing. And then they sue to keep him off the ballot in multiple states. And I guess he gets on. And then when he has change of heart, throws his weight behind Donald Trump, then they try to keep him in the race because democracy, I guess. So this is all the party of democracy that's worried about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy, that is doing everything they can to make sure that you can't vote for this guy unless it's going to hurt Donald Trump. Like, you can't vote for him in the Democratic primary, even though he's a lifelong Democrat. Kind of, if we had royalty in America, it would, I mean, arguably it'd be the Kennedy family. And I mean, this is the guy who's the son of RFK, Robert Kennedy Sr., who was assassinated. His uncle was assassinated, but the Kennedy name has been ingrained in American politics, particularly on the Democratic side, ever since JFK, or even before that, with Joe Kennedy and whatever I forget the oldest Kennedy boy that was killed in World War II. But they push him out. Then they try to keep him off the ballots as an independent until he decides to shake things up and go for Donald Trump. And now they're trying to keep him on. And it's all just really shady. It's like, if Kamala Harris is this historic and great of a candidate, she should have no problem just whooping up on both of these guys. She's got all the money, she's got the party apparatus, she's got the propaganda machine behind her. And so why are they spending all this time on a guy who they claim is just a kook and an anti-vaxxer and a conspiracy theorist and a radical environmentalist, and he does have some legit baggage in his past. There's no doubt about that. But if he's that bad, like, you should be able to just make the case against him, and people will believe you. But the problem with that is it's Kamala Harris, and we've seen her as a vice president. I had watched, I wouldn't say a lot of her speeches before she ran for president, but I was aware of her, and I'd watched a few, and she seemed somewhat articulate. I didn't agree with her, but there's a lot of left-wingers that I don't agree with that I think are smart people. A lot of them. I think Bernie Sanders is a smart guy. I don't agree with his policies, but I kind of somewhat respect the dude. He seems to, for the most part, or at least at one point, actually believe in his socialist bullshit. He's enriched himself. It's funny is how he's kind of a believer in capitalism when he's making money for himself, spouting his socialist bullshit. But Anyway, he's a guy that I find to be a smart, kind of a clever politician. Joe Biden at one point was a talented politician as well, and I don't see that with Kamala Harris, and I may get hit with the chauvinism or misogynistic or whatever, anti-woman, but I don't see any substance behind her. She's it was a legit debate of who sounded more incompetent between her and Joe Biden these past 4 years. Like I to her credit, Kamala would finish a sentence. Might take her a while to get there, and it wouldn't make any sense along the way, but she usually didn't end a sentence with anyway. So she has that going for her, but I don't see any substance there. Not even a little bit. So I just, at the end of the day, I look at you got Kamala Harris, who's a train wreck, and then Donald Trump, who's also kind of a train wreck. And that's really who your choices are. And so I'm almost just left with all right, so who are the people that like these people? And I haven't heard really any candidate or politician that I could see myself voting for that is throwing their weight behind Kamala Harris. And then there's Donald Trump, where I think even there's a lot of people that I respect and would vote for that are throwing their weight behind Donald Trump in kind of the same way that I am. They're just like, maybe not the biggest fan of this guy, but well, the people on the other side can't be trusted with power at all. And that's kind of where I'm at. I've got a lot of concerns going forward, and none of them are really being talked about in this election. Like the number one issue for me, even more so than the border. The border is a very close second. I think the border issue is a real it's a real problem. I mean, the city of Denver has pretty much just been overrun with Venezuelans in the past year, and New York. I mean, there's plenty of these cities that are just being overrun with illegal migrants, and so it's a big issue. But even more pressing than that is this Ukraine-Russia deal, where we are just getting closer and closer and closer to being directly at war with Russia, which is not somewhere we want to be. And I know I've said it many a time, or at least several times on this show, but I'll be 39 years old in October. And we have been at war mostly in the Middle East, but kind of all around the world my entire adult life. The 9/11 attacks happened when I was 16 years old. 16? 17. 16. I was 16 at the time. And so we're talking 23 years later. We're still in the Middle East. Joe Biden, to his credit, got us out of Afghanistan finally in the most spectacular failure in American military history. But to his credit, we are out. But now we've got this deal in Ukraine, which has been going on for 2 years now, or coming up on 2 years. We don't know how many people are dead because neither side really releases their casualty count, and the numbers they do release are clearly bullshit. And but I listen to a lot of national security type people, a lot of anti-war type people, and their estimates are like 500,000 people on the Ukrainian side and 100 to 200,000 on the Russian side. How accurate that is, I don't know, but if anything, I'm guessing that's an underestimate. And we can see that to be at least partially true if you look at the actions of the Ukrainians and how they've kept tweaking their draft to bring more guys in because they're running out of men. They've essentially got the entire European Union to deport, Ukrainian men back to Ukraine so they can be drafted and then get thrown into the meat grinder. We've spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 billion over the course of a year and a half on this war that Ukraine seems to be losing. They did like counter invade Russia and take some territory there, but I can't see that they're going to be able to hold it long term. They're not going to be able to keep it. I wouldn't imagine. So it seems to be like they're just kind of using this as a bargaining chip when they finally come to the negotiating table and try to end this thing. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this huge press by the Biden-Harris administration to bring that thing to a close before Election Day, and so put that as another feather in their hat. They defended the sanctity and sovereignty of Ukraine, which they keep phrasing this war as a war about democracy versus fascism. And then you look at Ukraine and like that is one of the most corrupt countries on earth. They are actively persecuting a major branch of the Christian faith, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They've persecuted priests. They've seized church property, and they are in the process of just outright banning the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which sounds, just so fucking democratic to me. It's in the meantime, we are sending longer range weapons. We are sending fighter jets, and in this incursion into Russia, most of the weapons that are being used are NATO or U.S. weaponry. So, like, it seems like it's just a matter of time until we have U.S. troops in force on the ground in Ukraine, and it's not a good idea. You guys know I'm a Ron Paul guy. I've listened to Ron Paul for quite a while now, and anybody who's familiar with him and his work, you'll know his big deal is the Federal Reserve and government spending. And what's one of the biggest expenditures of the U.S. government? And well, it's defense spending, as they call it, defense. But reality, it's the war machine, the military-industrial complex, and all these pseudo wars that we don't necessarily call wars, but they're still dudes with guns shooting other dudes with guns and bombs being dropped from planes and drones and stuff. It seems like war, but that we call it, military actions or something. But we've been at war for, essentially since World War II. We never really stopped going to war. There was like a short little period of time post World War II, and then directly we went into Korea, and then in between Korea and Vietnam, there was all sorts of coups happening around the world that our CIA played a role, if not the main role, in orchestrating across the world. Then we have the Vietnam War, which I guess technically is classified as a conflict, not a by the government anyways, but that lasted almost 20 years. 70,000 U.S. soldiers killed during that whole deal. My biological dad was Vietnam vet, served two tours over there, and was they didn't treat him well. He ended up pretty fucked up in the head because of it. So then we get out of Vietnam. Cold War is still brewing, still raging, honestly, and there's all sorts of skirmishes around the world, whether it be in the Middle East or South America, Africa, Europe, just kind of all over the place. We've been at some form of Afghanistan. We threw our weight behind the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to bleed the Soviet Union, and it worked to a certain extent. It wasn't the sole reason for the collapse of the Soviet Union. That mostly was terrible economic policy. But the amount of money that and men that they sent over to Afghanistan to eventually withdraw, it was a big part in bringing them down. But war, nonetheless. The 90s, which I grew up in the 90s and thought it was kind of peacetime, but then look back on it, my dad was deployed to Persian Gulf, which was a war to I guess liberate Kuwait from the Iraqis and Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, we helped put in power. And then when Iran and Iraq fought their big war in the 80s, we sold weapons to both sides. We actually sold the chemical weapons that we eventually supposedly went into Iraq to stop Saddam from using. Well, we sold the chemical weapons to him, and he did use them. He did have them at one point. But then comes the terror war. You have all this brewing conflict in the Middle East. A lot of it centered around Israel and our support for Israel. There was the Serbia-Kosovo deal in the 90s that I still don't know a ton about. But listening to the people where I get a lot of my foreign policy and national security news from, they're mostly anti-war type people. They'll say that was another war that didn't need to happen that we got involved in. But I don't know enough about it to comment. But we had all that happening. We had all the Middle Eastern stuff, and then 9/11 hits. Leading up to 9/11, we had, they had the first bombing of the World Trade Center. You had the bombing of the USS Cole. And there was an embassy, I believe, that was attacked. All in the lead up to the 9/11 attacks, and then the world really changes forever. We get attacked on our home soil, and then we go ape shit. We go fuck up Afghanistan for 20 years, and then Bush and his cronies, mostly Dick Cheney and the like, convince everybody that, well, now we got to go into Iraq too, because, well, Saddam was in on it. Turns out he wasn't. That didn't matter. Then now we got to get the weapons of mass destruction, which were never found. And that led to, depending on what numbers you use, but the numbers out there are anywhere from like $3 trillion to $7 trillion that we've spent since 2001 fighting terrorism. And we killed a lot of them. I mean, a lot of them. But it seems to be that there's more now than when we started the terror war. So even though we're killing a bunch of them, we're not really gaining any ground. And it's all just been one giant boondoggle. But all these weapon manufacturers and defense contractors have made, I mean, they've become wildly profitable. They made so much money. We pull out of Afghanistan and we were spending something like $10 million a day over there. And then, so that flow of money shuts off once we pull out of Afghanistan. And military industrial complex got to eat, boy. They gotta keep that money rolling in. And it wasn't too long before now we're sending all sorts of weapons to Ukraine to fight Russia directly. And it seems like a lot of people have just kind of forgot that Russia is a nuclear superpower. Well, superpower may be a little generous, but they got a lot of nukes, like more than we do. I mean, it's kind of inconsequential at this point, the total number of nuclear warheads each country has, but safe to say that we both have enough to destroy the world several times over on our own, let alone combined. And nobody has ever really clearly articulated to me why we should be enemies with Russia. Like, I get the Cold War, we were fighting the communists, but communism fell. Soviet Union fell, and while Russia and Putin, they're definitely not, liberal democracies. They're not exactly big on protecting human rights. It seems way counterproductive to be at odds with them. And so I look at this thing and I wonder if they're going to try to get this thing wrapped up before the election. It doesn't seem likely. Or are we going to escalate to the point where we're actively involved in a hot war with Russia before the election? And then that's the worst case scenario, because if we've learned anything about these wars over the years is that it doesn't take a whole lot to get in. But boy, it takes forever to get out. Korea lasted like 4 or 5 years, which was long enough. Vietnam was almost 20 and ended in a spectacular failure. Afghanistan was 20 years. We're going on 23 now with Iraq, and no end in sight really either place. And it just, once these things get started, it's really hard to pull back from. And there was 2 candidates talking about ending the Ukraine deal, RFK and Donald Trump, and now that RFK is essentially out of the race, that leaves the only candidate that's trying to stop what's going on over there is Donald Trump. And for me, that's the biggest issue on my plate right now, is avoiding war with Russia. I think that needs to be done at all costs. And I'm not a pacifist type guy. If we do end up at war with Russia, I will be rah America, because you have to be. If we're at war, if we're in a fight, we're all in. And that's kind of how I look at it. But until then, we need to be doing everything we can to stay away from that, because shit takes a toll on the country. If you were alive for any notable period of time pre 9/11, that shit takes a lot of toll. Like how many guys my age served in Iraq and Afghanistan and just get dropped by their government once they get out. Like don't take care of them. We've spent so much money, like all this inflation that we're feeling, like it's all compounded by years of war spending, and it's just going to get worse, let alone like the energy prices. Like Russia's a major producer of oil, and we've essentially got most of the world that won't trade with them because of this deal that, by the way, we helped provoke. Why we ever decided to get involved in Ukraine, which is several thousand miles away from the United States, where it's on the border with Russia. So it seems like a little more of their territory where we should have stayed clear, but we didn't. Come to find out that before Russia went into Ukraine, they sent an ultimatum to NATO saying that, hey, if you can guarantee that Ukraine will never be in NATO, we'll back off. But if you try to put Ukraine in NATO, we have no choice but to invade. And of course, NATO said, piss up a rope. And here we are. And it's one of those fights that it's like the end of the night at the bar, and your buddy is just looking to fight anybody, but he can't stand up. Don't worry, he is going to fight. There's no way he can win. And I've seen where you just let that guy go fight. But typically, nobody was stepping in at that point. It was like, hey man, this is stupid, but if that's what you want to do, have at it. I ain't helping you. And instead, we're at the point where it's like, no, we're drunk too, and we're just gonna jump in. And it doesn't matter that this guy's got a knife. We're gonna fight him. We're just gonna fight him because that's what we do. And it seems really, really fucking dumb. But that's where we're at. And it's kind of a long, rambling explanation to tell you why that I guess I'm voting for Donald Trump begrudgingly. But there's just been a lot of this shit that's been on my mind here lately, and I didn't know how to. I recorded this episode several different times and didn't end up publishing it just because I don't know if what I say makes any difference at all. But I know there's a lot of, I won't say a lot, I don't have a huge audience, but I know there are people that get a good chunk of their news from listening to me. So yeah, I felt like I needed to say my piece, whether you guys appreciate it or not. It's irrelevant at this point. I felt like it needed to be said, and I didn't know exactly how to say it the right way. So hopefully this brings a little clarity to the world, which there's not much clarity in the world anymore. But I'm a little nervous as to how this election can go, whether it's going to be a free and fair election, what kind of shenanigans are still left to be pulled against Donald Trump. And also, I don't know how good Donald Trump's going to be for the country. I like a lot of his policies. He says a lot of good stuff. But if you look when he was in office, the people went crazy. And a lot of that is on Donald Trump. There's a lot that's not. So I'm looking at the good, I'm looking at the bad, and I'm not convinced of the good. But I'm gonna roll the dice, and there's really not much other choice. The Kamala Harris is not a viable option for me. So that leaves me with Donald Trump. And while I'm not thrilled with the choice, Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God." And I may not like my choices here, but those are my options. It's the system that we have. You can play along, or you can bury your head in the sand. I'm going to bitch about it either way. So I'll roll the dice with Donald J. Trump, and hopefully he listens to some better people this time around. But the other side is not an option for me. They're setting us on a path to a banana republic / Soviet style dictatorship. So that's clearly worse than whatever nonsense Donald Trump will come up with. So that's where I'm at. We're almost done with this election cycle. I'm sure we'll go immediately right into the next election cycle after this one's over, but we got like 65 days or something like that till election day. So hunker down. It's already been weird, and if I had to guess, it's gonna get weirder. But don't listen to the media. I mean, they've lied to you at every turn. Find honest journalists. I think Matt Taibbi's a good one. Glenn Greenwald, Michael Schellenberg. There's a lot of really good journalists that are on Substack nowadays. They don't work for any of these major media outlets, and I think antiwar.com is another one I read pretty religiously, and they're not always right, but they're most of the time they're pretty good. It's a pretty good news source. And how I'd say kind of go with your gut, and I still say that to some extent, but it's a weird political climate we're living in. I don't know how it's gonna end up, but stay in the middle, America. Ride's gonna be a little bit rough, gonna be a little rank, and yeah, it's a good time to it's fall. Baseball playoffs will be here at the we got the playoff race really in full swing right now with the playoffs coming up. Football is starting. School is starting back up. There are plenty of distractions, real world type distractions to keep you sane. So the people that'll give you a hard time about paying attention to the circuses while the world's melting down, they have a point to a certain extent, but there's only so much you can do about the world melting down around you, and sometimes you just you need a little vacation from it all, and so why not turn on a football game or a baseball game or something and just distract yourself a little bit. It's okay, but pay attention. Some big shit's popping off, and I don't know where it goes, but just pay attention, and I'll try to keep you updated as much as I can. And still the greatest goddamn country on the face of the earth, or it's a little bit of a shit show right now. So hope you all have a good week. We'll should have a Death of Fun podcast this week, and then we'll be doing a sports show tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And on that note, move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horse is kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Just together, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right.